On August 24, 1982, while hiking through Gambrill State Park in Frederick, Maryland, two mushroom hunters made a disturbing discovery. In the thick forest and hiking trails of the Catoctin Mountains, they stumbled upon an old steamer trunk concealed under leaves and sticks near a gravel road. Upon opening it, they were met with a horrifying sight: skeletonized human remains and long brown hair. They immediately notified authorities, and the remains were transported to the local coroner for further examination. A preliminary examination of the remains found in the trunk indicated that they had been there for at least several months, with some medical officials believing that they have been there for upwards of a decade. So this suggests a time frame spanning from at least 1972 to 1982 for the victim's death. Officials were able to determine that the victim was a white female standing between 5 foot 2 inches and 5 foot 6 inches tall. The victim also had shoulder-length, slightly wavy dark brown hair. However, there were indications that her hair might have been artificially dyed this color. No clothing or personal items were found with the remains, except for a dark red towel that may have been used to wrap her body. Initial age estimates provided a wide range, suggesting the victim could have been anywhere between 17 and 45 years old. This led to composite sketches depicting her with a more mature appearance. This Jane Doe's dental history revealed a series of extensive and costly procedures. There were indications of multiple fillings, a root canal, and the placement of 2 gold crowns. Interestingly, she retained 2 wisdom teeth that were misaligned, potentially causing discomfort in her jaw. With all of this dental information, investigators were optimistic about a quick identification. Additionally, the skeletal characteristics of this woman were said to be strikingly unique. There were signs of pelvic wear indicating her involvement in competitive sports such as gymnastics, figure skating, horseback riding, or running. Moreover, she displayed signs of spondylolysis. This condition was identified by the small fractures in her spine, which are commonly observed in those that engage in strenuous physical activities. Now, it is possible that people with this condition are symptom-free or only have a mild back pain, but with the severity of this victim's condition in particular, she probably experienced chronic back discomfort throughout her entire life. It's quite possible that she was never even formally diagnosed with this condition. When medical officials examined the woman's feet, they also uncovered evidence of frequent high heel usage, alongside traces of a past toe fracture. They weren't able to determine a cause of death for her though, but they were leaning towards the possibility of strangulation. The bones around the base of her skull were broken, and a vertebrae towards the upper part of her neck had also been stained by blood. The reason medical officials haven't concluded that strangulation was indeed the cause of death is because those characteristics that were just mentioned may have occurred post-mortem as a result of being forced and crumpled up into the trunk. But it was clear that this was a homicide case. In 2012, authorities unveiled a revised composite of the woman discovered in the trunk, portraying her as a younger individual in her mid-20s. Investigators were hoping that this new composite sketch would bring in new leads, but nothing really came in to help the case. Over the decades, many theories have arisen as to the woman's identity, one of which suggested that she was some sort of accomplished athlete due to the wear on her body. Many people think that she is an equestrian, but those that disagree state that horseback riding would have the opposite effect on a rider's heels compared to wearing high heels. If you recall, we said that it seemed like this woman frequently wore high heels, which can alter the bone structure of a foot since heels can shorten the Achilles tendon. Equestrians do the opposite, as they have to put their heels downward into the stirrups and typically have longer Achilles tendons. Nevertheless, many believe that this theory is still possible and the victim had simply been an avid athlete earlier in her life. It's also often suggested that the woman was killed by a trucker. Frederick, Maryland is host to an abundance of various trucking routes and stops which serve as popular places for illegal activities. It is possible that this woman was abducted prior to reaching Maryland and was simply dumped there after being murdered. Money is oftentimes a topic that people are not exactly comfortable talking about, especially when one is in a situation where they need some help fast. That's why I'm such a big fan of Dave. Dave is a banking app that makes managing your money so much easier and assists in budgeting and can even provide it in advance with no credit check, no interest, and no late fees. Simply put, Dave is the banking app that's leveling the financial playing field. A simple feature displaying the amount of money I have left after factoring in my monthly bills is super convenient and super helpful to have. Millions of people have already downloaded Dave to make the financial side of life easier to manage. In fact, Dave has been able to save its users over $2.5 billion in overdraft fees since 2017. Dave gives their users something traditional banks won't: interest-free cash advances up to $500 in 5 minutes or less. Americans put together spend billions on overdraft fees every year, and Dave wants to put a stop to these predatory fees. So if you're in a position when you would overdraft, Dave spots you the money and doesn't charge you the standard $35 fee in the event of an overdraft. Dave would have been extremely helpful if I knew about it when I was in school, cause student loan payments are a pain. So give them a try today by going to dave.com/don'tlook, and you could get up to $500 in 5 minutes or less after downloading. No credit checks, no late fees, and no interest. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Eligibility criteria and instant transfer fees apply. Banking services provided by Evolve, member FDIC. Thank you so much to Dave for sponsoring today's video. This entry is going to be a pretty quick one and is rather obscure. It's regarded as a sort of reverse Mandela effect. It revolves around an exchange in a movie. What does it do? That's the beauty of it. It doesn't do anything. Apparently, this quote is from a well-known movie that people can't seem to recall the name of. Many mention how it gives off Back to the Future vibes. A show that may have had this exchange that is commonly brought up is Burke's Law. There's a conversation between two characters in the episode titled Who Killed 7-Eleven that is strikingly similar to the one in question, but those that do recall hearing the original quotes say that it is not from Burke's Law. They believe that it was from some form of media that is much more modern. Another rabbit hole led to a play from the late 1800s called Apocalyptic Butterflies. This particular exchange goes like this. What is it? It's a butterfly. What does it do? Doesn't do anything. That's the beauty of it. You nail them to your house, your mailbox, makes it distinctive. It was December 29th, 1999 in Veneta, Oklahoma, when best friends Ashley Freeman and Lauria Bible, both of whom were teenagers, would go missing. It was actually Lauria's birthday as well. Sometime late on the 29th or early on the 30th, the Freeman residence had been set on fire. A neighbor rushed to call firefighters after seeing the home in flames. Lauria had told her parents that she was going to hang out with Ashley that day at her house, so by the time they were contacted and they arrived, the building had been reduced to ashes. The parents feared the worst for their daughter as Lauria's car was parked near the driveway. Assuming that Lauria had met a terrible end within the flames, they were shocked that her body was not found. In fact, the only remains that were discovered belonged to Kathy Freeman, Ashley's mom. News outlets later interviewed Lauria's mother, Laureen, about her missing daughter, and she said, "The county coroner told me that there was only one body. I said, have they found anybody else? And she said no. They've looked, but there's no other bodies there." Lauria's father, Jay, was also interviewed, and he recounted the last time he saw his daughter. Lauria said to me, "Daddy, is it alright if I spend the night with Ashley in the Freeman's home?" I said, "Well, just make sure you're home by noon tomorrow." And noon tomorrow didn't happen the way it should have. It's obviously very strange that Kathy was the only person to be located in what remained of the home. But to make matters even more interesting, Kathy was determined to have died from a shotgun wound, specifically to her head. This led investigators to assume that the fire was intentional and that the missing individuals had been abducted. The day after the incident, Lauria's parents decided to stop by the Freeman house to have a look for themselves and try to find something that may lead them to their daughter. And surprisingly, they actually found another body which had been missed initially. This body was later identified as Danny Freeman, father of Ashley and husband to Kathy. And just like with Kathy, Danny also had a shotgun wound. Laureen described the discovery with the following statement. He did not have anything from the upper teeth all the way to the top of his head. That same day, authorities found Lauria's purse, which included her driver's license and a couple $100s in cash. This added to the likelihood that Lauria was abducted, and since Kathy's remains were still missing, she was likely with Lauria. Months passed and there wasn't much progress being made in the case, but then a rumor began to spread about the possibility that the sheriff's office and the Freemans had bad blood with each other. This rumor stemmed from the death of Danny's son, Shane. An officer had shot and killed Shane after he was involved in a crime where he stole a truck and firearm from a neighbor. Shane's death was ultimately deemed justifiable. However, his family wanted to file a wrongful death suit against local law enforcement. This possibility started to see traction when Danny's brother Dwayne came out and said, "Danny put his finger in my face and said, if anything ever happens to me, look at the sheriff's department. And he was serious. He was in my face to drive it home with me." Dwayne added that authorities threatened that they could do whatever they wanted to their family whenever they wanted. The chance that officers were indeed involved led to several polygraph tests being administered to the staff. And in the end, they were all deemed innocent with no knowledge of where Kathy and Lauria were. Another popular theory involves Danny being an illegal substance dealer. The fire may have been a result of a deal gone wrong. But a special agent named Steve Nutter thought that this was unlikely. He said, "If you wanted to consider that it was substance related, nothing fits correctly. The very last thing that people who committed the murders would want to do would be to abduct the children." Additional theories popped up over time, but a semi-significant revelation came up. A death row inmate by the name of Jeremy Jones came out and said that he was the one who murdered Danny and Kathy. When questioned as to why he did it, Jeremy said he was paying back a favor to a friend. As for Ashley and Lauria, Jeremy said he took them to Kansas where he shot them and left them in an abandoned mine. Jeremy gave the exact location of the mine to authorities, but after thoroughly searching the area, no signs of the girls were found. And then Jeremy would take back his confession, saying that he lied in order to get better food and privileges. Another person of interest would pop up in April of 2018. This was a 66-year-old man named Ronnie Dean Busick. He was arrested and charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. The case against Ronnie actually involved 2 other men who were dead at the time. According to authorities, witnesses came forward and said that Ronnie and his 2 accomplices, Warren Welch II and David Pennington, were bragging about and killing the teenagers. Ashley and Lauria were set to be held in Warren's trailer for several days after the fire before being killed. The witnesses even claimed that they were sharing Polaroids of the girls. As for the motive, it's said that they killed the Freemans over substance money. Warren's girlfriend actually informed police that he had an entire briefcase containing those Polaroids in question. Then, in that same month when Ronnie was arrested, he spoke to Lorene Bible and told her that he had no idea where her daughter or Ashley were. After further investigation, authorities were confident that Ronnie was a culprit, and in July of 2020, he pleaded guilty to being an accessory to first-degree murder involving Danny and Kathy's deaths. He was also charged for burning the Freeman home and abducting Ashley and Lauria. Ronnie Busick received a 15-year sentence, with 10 of those years to be served in prison and the remaining 5 as probation. He was released early in May of 2023 for good behavior. He served less than 4 years of his 10-year prison sentence. While the culprits have been identified, the whereabouts of Ashley and Lauria's remains are still unknown, and it seems that they will stay that way as Warren and David may have taken that information to the grave, if they were in fact involved. Rutger Hale is the name of a 22-year-old man who lost his life in October of 2013. The cause of death was decapitation. Rutger was driving with his girlfriend in the passenger seat in Wanaka, New Zealand, when all of a sudden an object traveling at immense speed broke the windscreen, collided with Rutger, then continued through the back window of the vehicle. When questioned by authorities as to what the object was, Rutger's girlfriend couldn't say with certainty what she saw. She described it as beige-colored and box-shaped. The hole left behind by the object was no larger than a fist. Investigators spent months trying to figure out just what the object was that struck Rutger, but they couldn't come to a concise answer. At one point, even the US Army and Defense Force was contacted for their opinion on the situation. But after carefully analyzing the damage of the vehicle and the area where Rutger was hit, they too had no idea what the object was. Needless to say that the object was never found either. There are many theories as to what the thing could have been, ranging from a bird, ice, space debris, a rock, or even some sort of projectile from a firearm. Later forensic investigations would reveal that the object did not disintegrate after making contact with the vehicle or Rutger. Around this time, investigators started to think that the object was made of steel. However, there was disagreement on this between the US Army and the New Zealand Defense Technology Agency, but something that both sides did agree upon was that the object had at least one sharp corner. Back in 2016, there was an American student named Colin Madsen who visited Siberia to study, specifically Irkutsk, which is a city east of Moscow. Colin had spent a couple of years in Irkutsk and one day decided to go on a trip that would take him west. About a week after the start of this trip, Colin's lifeless body was discovered. To this day, there is much debate revolving around Colin's death, with many believing that it was a cover-up. Being that Colin was studying abroad, you could probably guess that he was someone who liked to go out and explore new locations. His family and friends described him as a friendly and adventurous young man who also knew how to speak several different languages, including Russian, Spanish, Japanese, and more. On March 27, 2016, Colin and a few friends decided to go out on a hiking trip. Including Colin, the group consisted of 4 men. Their final destination was the top of a mountain called Love Peak, which by all intents and purposes was a pretty challenging task even for more experienced hikers. The group spent the night at a cabin with plans to get up at 5 a.m. and begin their journey. So everyone fell asleep around 2 a.m., but when the group awoke, they realized that Colin had gone missing. Initially, they did not think this to be too strange, as they thought he had simply gone out to use the restroom or just make some last-minute preparations. Colin even left his backpack behind, so the group was sure that he'd return shortly. But after some time had passed and Colin was still missing, the others grew concerned. They stepped out and started yelling out for Colin, but he never showed up. After asking locals and scouring the nearby vicinity, Colin's friends still couldn't find him. Again, Colin was an experienced adventurer. He's gone on lots of trips to foreign countries and explored the wilderness, so it's strange that he would get lost in this location, which is a pretty popular destination and well-traveled. Surely, Colin was safe and just up to some sort of antics. Another odd detail about Colin's disappearance occurs when his friends call police. According to the group, they spent several hours trying to call the police so they could help find Colin, but they kept pushing them off. When the police realized that the calls weren't going to stop, they actually accused the friends of being responsible for Colin's disappearance. Authorities shared a theory that the group had murdered Colin before having sex with his body. Then the group buried him out in the forest. Obviously, the friends denied having any involvement in the actual disappearance. Eventually, search parties consisting of officials as well as other friends of Colin were formed. Even Colin's own mother flew over in order to help with the search efforts. It took 8 days for Colin to be found, but when he had already died. From the get-go, there were several odd details about his death. Colin was found lying on his back with his limbs outstretched and fists balled up. It didn't exactly look like the position someone who was lost would die in. His socks were also removed, with his boots being untied. Furthermore, his boots were oddly clean. Colin's eyes and mouth were also open when he was discovered. His wallet and passport were also found in his possession. As far as his clothing goes, some of it was also torn up. Immediately, news outlets shared that Colin's death was simply accidental. Some medical officials even agreed with this conclusion, stating that Colin was inexperienced and was not prepared for the elements. But like we already went over, this didn't make much sense given Colin's experience. Colin's own mother said the following after hearing these conclusions. He would never have walked to a place in the pitch dark with his shoes unlaced, no socks, and when he was leaving for a climb in just a few hours that he was so excited about. Colin had bilateral ankle surgery the year before and could not hike or walk very far without socks. The boots rubbed on the scars without socks and it really bothered him. On the topic of this being a cover-up, Colin was known to be a supporter of this group called Greenpeace. Greenpeace is basically an advocate for protecting nature. They're a global network of independent campaigning organizations that use peaceful protest and creative confrontation to expose global environmental problems and promote solutions that are essential to a green, just, and joyful future. Now, around the time Colin died, Greenpeace was active in the Irkutsk region. There was illegal logging going on in the forested areas that were being covered up by fires. So Greenpeace went out and tried to stop the logging altogether. Police were not fond of what the group was trying to do, leading them to threatening them. Colin himself even participated with these groups at the time. When authorities realized that protesters weren't going to step aside, they got very aggressive. It's believed that because Colin was an avid Greenpeace supporter, local authorities hated him and actually went out of their way to kill him. Apparently, the university that Colin was attending at the time of his death sent a translator in an attempt to assist in the investigation. But as soon as the translator informed police of her business in the area, they literally spat in her face and said that Colin was gay and he was in the forest to have an orgy with his friends. Colin's friends also later revealed that during their questioning, police urged them to confess to his murder. One member of the group even fled Russia shortly after Colin's body was found, fearing that he was going to be in much more danger by local authorities if he stayed. And one final detail about the theory of authorities being responsible before we move on. Before Colin was found, his friends shared that he was wearing this pendant around his neck. It was basically a circular mess of snakes. When Colin's body was located, this pendant was nowhere to be found, but when authorities gave Colin's mother all of his belongings, the pendant was part of those items. It is possible that the necklace was found later on in the investigation elsewhere, but there are many people who point to this particular detail as a clear sign that police were responsible. While Colin's case has been officially closed, the lawyer representing Colin's family, Ivan Pavlov, said the following. We contend that the investigation's finding of Madsen's non-violent death are not based on factual circumstances. Ivan pointed to the detail that there was little decomposition to Colin's body when he was found, 8 days after his disappearance, hinting at the possibility that he was being held captive elsewhere. Colin's mother personally thinks that the case was a cover-up. She thought that this was done in order to avoid the possibility of any drama occurring since an American died on Russian soil. Hey everyone, if you've made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much. It's been a little while since I've spoken to all of you guys at the very end of a video, but I wanted to thank you all for the amazing support this month on all of the videos. As you guys probably noticed, I've put out a lot more content than I normally have, and hopefully that can remain consistent for the rest of the year and for the foreseeable future. I also wanted to apologize for the length of this video. I originally intended for this to be an hour-long video, but I've had to help out my family with some things in the last couple of days, and surprisingly, it was more exhausting than I thought it would be, which I think made me get sick at some points, which has made recording this video a lot more difficult. I would get like, even right now as I'm speaking, I'm getting kind of lightheaded, and for some of the entries, I had to read it over like 8 times because I would just keep stumbling on my words. I basically forgot how to speak at some points. I don't know why. I think I'm just like a little bit tired is all. I believe this is part 20, so part 21 of this Unsolved Mysteries iceberg will be 1 hour long whenever that one comes out, which should be in March sometime. Should be 2 parts in March. But anyways, I just wanted to talk to you guys all again at the end here. Thank you again so much for all the support. It's been amazing. And by the time this video goes out, we are down 2 months into 2024, so hopefully this new year has been treating you guys pretty good. And that's all I got for you guys today. Stay safe, and I hope you all have an amazing week.